Imagine for a second that you decided to basically treat your marriage, your sleep schedule, and your entire career trajectory exactly like the global stock market.
Oh, wow. That sounds intense.
Right. Like every morning you wake up and you analyze the supply chains of your patients or, the inflation rate of your stress and the market demand for your attention.
Yeah, at first glance, that probably sounds incredibly cold. Or, honestly, maybe even a little dystopian.
Exactly. I mean, you are a lifelong learner. You devour books and articles to upgrade your life, and you're already bombarded with all these generic productivity hacks.
Right. The ones telling you to optimize every single minute of your day.
Yeah, exactly. The last thing you need is to turn your soul into like a literal math equation.
It is a totally valid hesitation. I mean, when we try to quantify our personal lives, it usually creates this toxic cycle.
Oh, totally.
The desperate pursuit of getting better actually ends up draining the joy out of the very life you are trying to improve.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because our mission for today's deep dive is to ditch that generic hustle culture entirely.
Which is so needed right now.
It really is.
Yeah.
We are drawing from this fascinating piece by podcaster.capital. It's called Discovering Your Personal Market Equilibrium.
It's a great read.
Yeah, and the core premise is that applying the fundamental economic principles of supply, demand, and the invisible hand to your personal growth is actually, the most elegant, empowering way to escape information overload.
Right, because it gives you a dynamic lens to
Yeah.
finally understand why you feel burned out or, why you feel stagnant.
Exactly. And it shows you how to engineer a life where your effort actually matches your reward.
And we should clarify, we're not talking about rigid spreadsheets or treating your friends like transactions.
No, definitely not.
We're using economics as a diagnostic tool. Like in a literal marketplace, if supply exceeds demand, goods pile up unsold and prices crash.
Right.
And if demand completely outstrips supply, you get skyrocketing prices and massive shortages.
Which makes sense.
Well, we experience those exact same market failures in our personal lives. But because we lack the vocabulary for it, we just call it exhaustion or resentment or feeling like an imposter.
Yeah, so to fix that burnout, we have to look at the invisible forces causing it. Let's paint a picture that I know you, listening right now, have felt in your bones.
Oh, I'm sure we all have.
Right. So it is Friday evening, you are looking back at your week, and your calendar was just this brutal stack of back-to-back meetings.
Of course.
Yeah, and you have this side project that is practically begging for your attention. Your family wants quality time.
Always.
And looming over all of this is this creeping guilt that you haven't worked out in days. And, that stack of unread personal growth books on your nightstand is practically judging you.
That intense pulling tension you feel in your chest on a Friday night.
Yeah.
In economics, that has a very specific name. It's called disequilibrium.
Disequilibrium. And there is this brilliant visual concept in the article to represent this state.
I love this visual.
Yeah, picture a person balancing precariously on a tightrope, stretched over a jagged rock.
Okay.
On one side of the balancing pole, you have icons pulling you down. So a battery representing your finite daily energy and a briefcase representing your current work skills.
Right, your inputs.
But pulling on the opposite side of the pole, you have a sun representing your baseline happiness, heavy weights for your physical health, and a rocket ship representing your massive ambitions.
It's a lot to balance.
It really is. So if that tightrope is our personal market, how do we translate 24 hours a day into a literal supply and demand curve?
Well, we could anchor this to a fundamental formula. Q's equals QD.
Quantity supplied equals quantity demanded.
Exactly. Let's look at the personal supply side of that equation first. Your supply is strictly finite. You only have 24 hours.
Right, no matter what you do.
Yeah, and you possess a very specific limited reservoir of cognitive and physical energy each day. Plus, you have the skills and emotional maturity you have honed up to this exact moment in time.
So that is the inventory you bring to the market.
Correct. That's your supply.
And pulling against that inventory is the demand side.
Yeah, your personal demand is a really complex mix of external and internal pressures.
Like what specifically?
Well, external demands are the obvious ones. Your boss expecting a 60-hour week, your mortgage, societal expectations.
Right, the stuff coming at you.
Yeah, and internal demands are the pressures you place on yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Your financial targets, your ideal body image, the legacy you want to leave.
Okay, that makes sense.
What's fascinating here is that just like the global supply of crude oil or, say, coffee beans, when your personal supply and demand curves do not intersect perfectly, the market breaks.
Wow. So we experience an actual personal market crash.
Exactly.
Let's look at the two ways that crash happens according to the source. If I'm supplying way more time and energy than a situation actually demands or rewards, I have a surplus.
Right.
And in human terms, that is burnout. I am dumping cheap excess inventory into a void.
It's just wasted energy.
Yeah. But if my internal demands and sky-high ambitions are far outpacing my current supply of skills or daily energy, I have a shortage.
And that shortage manifests as severe imposter syndrome.
Because I want to conquer the world, but I simply cannot deliver the goods yet.
Right. Now that we understand the shape of these curves, we really have to map them onto real-world sectors.
To see how it plays out.
Yeah, to see how Adam Smith's invisible hand forces corrections. Think about a software engineer who just graduated from a 6-month coding boot camp.
Okay, so their personal supply of skills is relatively low. I mean, they know the basics, but they aren't building complex cloud architecture yet.
Exactly. However, the market demand from the tech industry for any kind of engineering talent might be incredibly high.
Right, so their initial equilibrium, their sweet spot, is likely an entry-level position with a modest salary and heavy mentorship.
Yeah, but let's say they spend the next 2 years aggressively upskilling. They learn new languages, they build a stellar portfolio.
They've effectively shifted their supply curve to the right.
Yes. Because they have more high-value inventory to offer, they should command a higher price, meaning a better title, more money, and greater autonomy.
I have to push back on this, though, just based on what society tells us.
Okay, go for it.
Everything in our culture tells us to just hustle harder. If we have a surplus of skills and energy, if we are in our prime and crushing it, the standard advice is to keep saying yes to every single project to maximize the return.
A hustle mindset.
Yeah. Why shouldn't we just flood the market with our supply?
Well, that is the ultimate trap of maximization culture. Economics explains beautifully why endless hustling is a totally flawed strategy.
How so?
Let's examine the consequence of chronic oversupply. If you say yes to every project, work every weekend, and sacrifice your sleep, the short-term price you get in return feels highly rewarding.
Oh, for sure. Your boss praises you, maybe you get a quick bonus. Your brain registers a win.
Right. But the invisible hand of your biological and emotional market cannot be ignored forever. It will absolutely force a correction.
So the crash isn't a possibility, it's an inevitability.
Completely. When you artificially inflate your supply by burning through your baseline reserves, the market correction is violent.
Oh, wow.
It looks like a sudden autoimmune flare-up, a total collapse in creative thinking, or a partner who finally packs their bags.
Because something has to give.
Yeah, the invisible hand is essentially stepping in and saying, you refuse to slow down, so the price of your well-being has completely collapsed.
That makes so much sense.
Right.
We treat our energy like fiat currency. We can just print endlessly, but it is actually backed by a gold standard of our physical health.
That's a great way to put it.
And we can apply this dynamic lens outside of our careers, too. The text points out that relationships operate as incredibly sensitive markets.
Oh, absolutely. Think about emotional supply and demand.
Okay.
Your emotional supply consists of your vulnerability, your active listening, the actual physical time you dedicate to your partner.
Right, and demand comes from your partner's needs and the baseline maintenance the relationship requires.
Exactly. So a severe disequilibrium here looks like chronic one-sided giving.
You are supplying a massive surplus of emotional labor that isn't being matched or valued.
Which over time mathematically guarantees resentment.
Which raises the question, if you are in a relationship recession, how do you fix it without it feeling like a hostile negotiation?
By understanding how prices work. In a healthy economy, prices communicate value and scarcity.
Okay.
In a relationship, honest, difficult conversations are literal market signals.
Interesting.
When you sit down and say, I am feeling drained and I need more quality time without our phones, you are actively readjusting the demand curve.
You are repricing the relationship.
Yes, you are signaling that the current exchange rate of energy is unsustainable and a new equilibrium must be found.
I love that framing. Setting a boundary isn't picking a fight, it is issuing a vital market signal. It neutralizes the guilt.
It really does.
And we see this exact same supply and demand struggle in our physical health, too. Your body is the ultimate energy market.
100%.
Your supply is dictated by your nutrition, your sleep quality, and your daily movement. And the demand is your baseline metabolic rate, your cortisol levels from work, and your actual workouts.
So when someone decides to go on a brutal 1,200-calorie crash diet, they are intentionally manufacturing an extreme artificial shortage.
And the body, acting as a highly efficient market, just panics.
Exactly. It slows down your metabolism to preserve fuel.
Wow.
On the flip side, if you are overtraining at the gym for 2 hours a day while surviving on 4 hours of sleep and high stress, you are creating a massive surplus of fatigue.
So true equilibrium in health is never found in those extremes.
Never. It is found in sustainable compounding habits. It is identifying that 30-minute daily workout matched with a realistic, nourishing food intake.
Where you make steady progress without your physiological market crashing.
Exactly.
Okay, if finding this equilibrium is so logical, we really have to address the elephant in the room. Why do we stay stuck?
That's the big question.
Yeah, why do we linger in toxic jobs for years or hold on to bad habits that are clearly bankrupting our energy?
To answer that, we have to look at market shocks and human irrationality.
Let's talk about life shocks first. A global pandemic, an unexpected layoff, a sudden medical diagnosis.
Right. These events don't just gently nudge your curves, they shift them instantly and violently.
Because suddenly, the demand on you spikes astronomically. You might have terrifying financial pressure or sudden caregiving responsibilities.
And at the exact same time, your emotional and physical energy violently contracts because you are paralyzed by uncertainty and fear.
And this brings up a crucial redefinition of resilience from the article. We are usually taught that resilience is about gritting your teeth, weathering the storm, and bouncing back to exactly who you were before.
Which is such a harmful myth. In economic terms, that is completely wrong. The difference lies in dynamic versus static equilibrium.
Tell me more about that.
Well, static equilibrium is the stubborn desire to cling to how things used to be. It is fighting reality.
Like trying to pretend the shock didn't happen.
Yeah. If the market has fundamentally changed, trying to operate on the old rules only creates prolonged, agonizing friction.
And dynamic equilibrium.
Dynamic equilibrium accepts that change is the only constant. True resilience is the ability to assess the wreckage, find the new stable intersection of supply and demand rapidly after a shock, and build from there.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Why are we so terrible at finding that new stable point?
Behavioral economics has a lot to say about this.
Yeah, I want to introduce an analogy from the piece that perfectly captures our reluctance to change. Imagine a stubbornly proud retail store owner.
Okay, I can picture that.
They have a warehouse packed to the ceiling with inventory that nobody wants to buy anymore. But instead of marking down the prices, clearing the shelves, and bringing in new relevant products, they refuse to take the hit to their pride.
Right.
They just let the goods sit there, gathering dust, paying rent on a dead warehouse.
What that store owner is experiencing is called deadweight loss.
Deadweight loss.
Yeah. In a macro economy, deadweight loss is the pure, tragic waste of potential when a market fails to clear efficiently.
And in our personal lives.
In our personal lives, deadweight loss is the tragedy of spending 5 years in a mismatched career path because you already invested so much time in it.
Oh, that hits hard.
Or pouring weekends into a side hustle you don't even care about anymore just because you told people you were going to do it.
So we are hoarding unsold inventory in our own lives, refusing to mark it down. But what is the psychological mechanism behind that? Why do we willingly accept the deadweight loss?
Because humans are famously irrational actors. Behavioral economics pinpoints two massive culprits here.
What's the first one?
The first is present bias. Our brains heavily overvalue immediate, comfortable gratification over long-term stability.
So the effort required to update your resume and interview feels terrible today, so we put it off.
Exactly, even if it guarantees a better life next year.
And the second culprit?
The second culprit is loss aversion. There's a psychological pain of losing something we already have is twice as powerful as the pleasure of gaining something new.
Wow. So we stay stuck in the miserable job or the draining relationship because we know the exact contours of that misery.
Right. It is a known asset. We fear the invisible hand of change because the familiar pain feels safer than the unknown.
That is so profound. To prove that we can actually overcome these behavioral traps and intentionally manipulate our personal markets, let's look at two high-level case studies mentioned in the text.
These are great examples of people who engineered their own equilibrium.
Yeah, the first is Sarah Blakely, the founder of the billion-dollar shapewear company, Spanx. She is a masterclass in starting with massive disequilibrium.
She really is. She began her journey with an enormous internal demand. She had a crystal clear vision of a product that women desperately needed.
But her supply curve was practically non-existent.
Right. She had $5,000 in savings, absolutely no background in manufacturing or fashion, and she faced a wall of rejections from every major hosiery mill.
Most people in that situation would experience imposter syndrome, lower their ambitions, and match their demand to their tiny supply.
But Blakely didn't. She relentlessly forced her supply curve to shift to the right.
How?
She wrote her own patent by reading a textbook. She cold called mills until one finally said yes. She stood in department stores demonstrating the product herself.
So she continuously injected human capital into her supply side until it finally intersected with the massive global demand.
Exactly, creating a billion-dollar equilibrium.
Now, if we look at the opposite side of the spectrum, we can examine a very different but equally brilliant economic move, Simone Biles.
Yes. When she famously withdrew from the team finals and individual all-around events at the Olympics, the public reaction was highly polarized.
To say the least.
But if we connect this to the bigger picture through this specific economic lens, it was a masterstroke of market manipulation.
She recognized the terrifying disequilibrium. She was experiencing the twisties, a dangerous loss of spatial awareness.
Right. Her internal supply of physical safety and mental clarity had plummeted, but the external demand, the expectations of the world, the media, the sponsors, was at an absolute peak.
A static equilibrium mindset would have told her to grit her teeth, push through the massive shortage, and risk catastrophic physical injury just to meet the market demand.
Instead, she deliberately restricted the external demand. She withdrew.
Which was so brave.
It was. And by doing so, she protected her long-term market, her career longevity, her spinal health, and her mental well-being. She recognized that no gold medal was worth bankrupting her future supply.
So what does this all mean for you? We have explored the theory, the traps, and the case studies. Now we need to move to the blueprint.
The actionable part.
Exactly. How do you actually apply this framework to your life before you go to sleep tonight? There is a highly practical 5-step process we need to walk through from the source material.
Step 1 is the market audit. You cannot fix what you haven't measured.
Okay, so what does an audit look like?
You need to physically sit down, look at your calendar, and plot your current skills and daily energy against your actual obligations.
You're looking for the gaps.
Right. Where are the gaps? Be brutally honest with yourself. If you are waking up exhausted every single day, do not ignore it.
Because that is a flashing red price signal telling you that your market is fundamentally failing.
Exactly. Once you see the gaps, step 2 is shifting your supply intentionally.
Because you can't just magically wish for more energy or better skills.
No, you have to invest in your human capital. And this doesn't mean grinding for 40 extra hours.
Oh, thank goodness.
Right. The blueprint suggests dedicating a focused 5 to 10 hours a week, specifically to increasing your leverage.
What kind of leverage?
That might mean taking an online course to learn a new software, setting up Zapier automations to eliminate repetitive tasks, or finally learning how to delegate effectively.
So you weren't carrying the entire supply burden yourself.
Exactly.
Okay, step 3 is managing demand wisely. You have to stop letting other people dictate the demands on your life.
You must become a boundary price setter. You have to start saying no to protect your equilibrium.
And that requires clear communication of your market rules, right?
Yes. When you tell a client or a colleague, I am available for questions until 6 p.m., after which I am offline, you are setting a definitive, non-negotiable price for your time and access.
Step 4 is ensuring this entire process isn't just like a New Year's resolution that you abandon in February. You need market checks.
Because the global economy is constantly shifting, and so is your life. Implement a monthly review.
Keep it simple, though, right?
Yeah, it doesn't have to be complex. A simple spreadsheet or a dedicated page in your Notion workspace where you track your energy flowing in versus your energy flowing out.
You need this regular cadence to spot minor disequilibrium before it spirals into a full-blown crash.
Exactly.
Which leads perfectly into the final and maybe most liberating step. Embrace dynamic equilibrium.
We need to accept that a perfect, static, peaceful balance is a complete myth.
It just doesn't exist.
No. The real skill of a lifelong learner is the ability to execute rapid reequilibration. And there is a crucial nuance here that we have to highlight.
I'm glad you brought this up. The text emphasizes that finding your equilibrium is absolutely not about achieving a 50-50 split in your life.
The concept of a 50-50 work-life balance is mathematically impossible to sustain. Equilibrium is about optimal allocation.
It is about understanding the law of diminishing returns.
Exactly. There might be a month where you are launching a massive project or you have a newborn baby and your equilibrium is 90-10.
All your energy is going to one place.
Yes. But you recognize it is a temporary market condition, and you intentionally shift it back when the season changes.
Giving yourself permission to exist in asymmetrical balance, rather than trying to perfectly maximize every hour of every day, is incredibly freeing.
It changes everything.
Treating your life like a self-correcting market isn't cold or robotic. It is the ultimate framework for sustainable excellence.
And it is how you guarantee that your success compounds over decades without bankrupting your soul in the process.
So well said. Now, if we connect all of this to the bigger picture, the article raises an incredibly provocative final question for you to mull over.
This is my favorite part to think about.
We've established that self-interest isn't inherently selfish. It is the engine of personal growth. And we've agreed that setting firm boundaries acts as a necessary price signal to the people around you.
Right.
But what happens when your perfectly optimized boundaries become a sudden, violent life shock to someone else's demand curve?
Oh, that's such a good point. If you and your partner and your boss are all ruthlessly optimizing your own personal markets at the exact same time, what happens?
Does that cause a macroeconomic recession in your shared relationships because everyone is aggressively pulling back their supply?
Or does that initial clash force everyone to the negotiating table, eventually resulting in a beautifully balanced, high-value trade agreement between you all?
That is a phenomenal question. Are we trading in isolation, or are we part of a shared emotional economy? That is your mission for today.
A great mission to have.
Pick one area of your life, your career, your physical health, your closest relationship. Find where that tightrope is swaying dangerously and issue one clear market signal to start correcting it. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep learning, keep optimizing, but from now on, do it for equilibrium.